Right. So you are very welcome to our foundational discussions of the Advanced Research Methods class. Today we are looking at philosophical foundations, particularly within the context of social science research. What you're going to understand from our discussions would be that research method is far more than just getting a topic, deciding which methodology to use and what kind of data to collect. Because many students and many researchers who are not very well grounded philosophically, things that once you have your research topic and you have some way to gather your data, then you are doing research. But research is far more political than what you would ordinarily believe. Every research is a political endeavor on its own. And so you have to be very well grounded philosophically so that when you know how you align your practice and your research, then you know how to even develop your research topic in the first place. What kind of research questions should you ask? What kind of methodology should you choose, and what kind of theory? Because there are several times that sometimes you read research and the topic is from a different philosophy. The research question is from a different philosophy. The theory is from a different philosophy. The analysis and the whole discussion, so you don't know where the researcher stands and situates him or herself in the field that he or she is contributing to. And so this foundational discussion is going to help you guys to be right from the very start thinking, which philosophical domain would I want to position myself as a psychologist and as a researcher, and how should that shape my research and my identity going forward? Now, we are going to have this discussion in 4 parts. I will do the basic introduction. We'll look at the critical building blocks, the building blocks of philosophy. And then we'll look at the key philosophical traditions or the research paradigms. And then lastly, we'll look at how to define yourself as a psychologist, upcoming psychologist, as a practitioner, and then as a researcher. And so whilst I'm at it, if you have any question, you can put up your hand and then you can ask the question. Also, after every session, probably after session 2, 3, 4, I'll reserve some time for questions as we move on. So when we talk about philosophy, we are looking at how do we acquire knowledge? How do we interpret knowledge, and how methodological choices are made? And so philosophical foundations look at the way we conceptualize problems in the first place. For example, if you're interested in a particular research topic, what problem do you see there? And how are you positioning that problem? Because the way you position the problem, that will shape the way you will generate knowledge about the problem. For example, let's say you are interested in depression. Your philosophical foundation will lead you to conceptualize the problem in a particular way that aligns with your philosophy. For example, as a psychologist, are you going to look at individual strength as a basis for depression? For example, are some people psychologically strong than others? And for which reasons those who are not so psychologically strong develop depression? Somebody from a different philosophy could ask the question that way. Another person could also ask the question such that, are there certain things in our social system that expose some people to depression? For example, high unemployment rates? Are there some cultural practices that expose people to depression? Now, when you look at these two kinds of research questions, they are fundamentally conceptualizing the problems in different ways. The person who is asking, are there some psychological strengths? Are some people psychologically stronger than others? The person is conceptualizing depression as an internal personality problem. For the scientist who is asking the question, are there certain things in our social system that expose people to depression? The person is also conceptualizing depression as a social problem. In other words, individuals are not the problem. The way we run our society is the problem. So you understand that in the same depression, two different psychologists, depending on which philosophical background they are coming from, they will ask different research questions. So sometimes when students are choosing research topics, they will say, oh, this topic, somebody has done it before. That topic, somebody has done it before. There's no research question or there's no research topic that has never been done by anybody before. Every research question has been done by somebody. But the philosophical standpoint you are coming into the problem will help you perhaps to look at the problem in a new way, which is different from the way other people have looked at the problem. And so as graduate students coming up, you would have to be very well grounded philosophically so that you'll be able to ask the right questions, generate the right knowledge, and then implement the right solution. And so understanding the philosophical paradigm, it is very essential to help you to be able to develop a very nuanced, contextually relevant, and an impactful approach to your research and your practice. If not, you realize that if you are not very well grounded philosophically, if you are not well grounded philosophically, then your practice will be all over the place. You won't be able to place yourself within, for example, when all psychologists meet, let's say you're a clinical psychologist, and there are a group of clinical psychologists that have met. Where do you stand in the midst of the clinical psychologists? And also, for example, if you're a clinical psychologist, you're a neuropsychologist, you're a counseling psychologist, and you are all looking at one problem, okay? Let's say you are all studying or researching grief or prolonged grief disorder. So if you're a group of psychologists, you're a clinical, somebody is neuro, somebody is a counseling psychologist, you are all researching on prolonged grief disorder. What kind of question are you asking as a clinical psychologist? What kind of question are you asking as a neuro? What kind of question are you asking as a counseling psychologist? And which philosophical background are you coming from into your question? These are very important issues to understand as you begin to develop your identity in your field. And so by philosophy, we are looking at underlying systems of beliefs and assumptions that guide the way you as a researcher, the way you understand reality. How do you acquire your knowledge? And how do you conduct your inquiries? Because fundamentally, every research question you are going to pick or every research topic you are going to pick is some part of reality that you are going to research. What kind of assumption do you make as a psychologist about this particular reality you have taken? And how do you go about acquiring knowledge in that area? And so understanding philosophy is about developing the basis for your research paradigms, for your methodologies, and for your interpretation. When you start reading other people's research, when you start doing literature review, for example, it will be very important to understand that this paper I'm reading and the kind of research question being asked in this paper, it's possible that the researchers belong to this philosophical thinking. And that is why they're asking this question. That is why they are interpreting their results this way. That way you are able to understand that even this research question this research topic that I'm interested in, what kind of philosophies have dominated the research so far? Do I belong to those philosophies, or am I coming in with a different philosophy to that field? And then it helps to make your research communicate with the research of other people in the same field. And this is why philosophy is very important. And so philosophy will help you to take a stand in 4 main domains. For example, it will help you to understand where you stand in terms of what reality is. When I talk about reality, reality could be the subject matter you are interested in. Are you interested in depression? What are your assumptions about the reality of depression? Are you interested in anxiety or grief disorder or any number of psychological variables? What are your stance on the reality of this? What is also the nature of knowledge in this field? How should we study our society? How should we study human behavior? And how do we construct knowledge around our society and our human behavior so that we are able to better understand it and we are able to better intervene when the need arises? Also, you also come to understand the role of values. Every researcher is coming from a particular social background, either your religion or your culture or your gender or your life experiences or even your race, whether you are an African or you are an European or you are an American or you are an Asian. All of these have implications on certain values we hold in life about what is life, what constitutes a good life, how should human beings behave, and how should we live. All of these values, how do these things influence your research? The more you understand philosophy, the more you even begin to understand better where your research topic is coming from and why are you interested in this particular research topic. Because every researcher has a reason why they are interested in a particular topic. But if you are not very good, if you don't have a good grounding in philosophy, you will not really understand that, why am I drawn to this research topic? Okay, because it didn't just happen by chance that you are interested. There's something about you. There's something about your background and your philosophy and your approach to life that is making you interested in this particular topic of all possible topics. And whether you like it or not, you will go into that research with those values. If you are not aware of the values, it can be very dangerous. All right, so we'll look at the role that values play in life and in research and how values will shape your own, the research that you are doing. And lastly, we'll look at approach to inquiry. What strategies or what methodological tools are you drawn to? There are some people who say, I like quantitative research. I like qualitative. I like randomized control trial. I like experiment. Why do you like it? Where is it coming from? Right? How is your preference for this methodology linked to the values you hold? And so we are going to engage in a discussion that aligns all of these things for you properly so that when you are picking a research topic, you have a good understanding of your philosophical stance on this topic and also appreciate other researchers' philosophical stance on the same topic. And that way it will help you to understand where you deviate from other researchers who are doing the same topic and where you align with other researchers doing the same topic. Now, any questions so far before we move to the session 2? Yes, Madeleine, go ahead.
So when you are actually looking at what about your background, what about your personality that is making you choose this topic, choose the methodology to use, won't it lead to biases in gathering data or the type of question you will be asking if you have to be considering all the what about you, what about the society, what about this? Won't it lead to biases?
Okay, that's a very good question you're asking. Now, this question will be answered along the discussion, and you will come to understand that if you are not aware of your values, you are likely to be biased than when you are aware. Right? We'll treat this in the next session that we are going. But it's a very good question you're asking. I want you to hold on to the question. When we get to where we are discussing, should you let us know where you stand, or should you close your eyes as if you don't have values about this research topic? Which one is better? All right. And then when we are done with session 2, maybe we'll engage in that discussion again. Is that okay?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. So let's look at the building blocks. Is there any other question from anybody else? All right. Now let's look at the fundamental building blocks of philosophy. Now, when you read different philosophical texts, they have different texts uses different building blocks, but fundamentally all texts, you would find these 3 building blocks. All texts, you find these 3 building blocks: ontology, epistemology, and methodology. Ontology, epistemology, and methodology. And as a graduate student and as an up-and-coming psychologist or a researcher, you have to have a good understanding of these 3. You have to have a good understanding of these 3. What are your ontological stand? What is your epistemological stand? And how do your ontology and your epistemology influence your methodological choices? All right. And so let's pick them one after the other, discuss it, and let's see what they mean, so that right from the very beginning, you can start thinking through, where do I stand? How do I see life? How do I want to approach my research, my psychological profession going forward? So when we talk about ontology, ontology basically means the nature of reality. How do we see existence? Okay, the branch of philosophy that is concerned with the nature of reality and existence is what we mean by ontology. Now, ontology helps researchers to understand what is real and what can be studied. So if you go into biology, for example, there are things biology studied. If you move into the natural sciences, for example, biology, chemistry, physics, and all of that, they study objects. So it's very easy for you to know that, oh, this object exists because our eyes can see. For example, I mean, the mountains, for example, are real. So there are researchers who study mountains. There are researchers who study the brain and all of that. Now, these are real and can be studied. But when you come to the social sciences, where most of the times what we study are very abstract, okay? They are not always things that can easily be seen with our naked eyes. So the question then is, these things that we are talking about, are they real? How do they come into reality? Okay, and so your understanding of the nature of reality will help you to understand whether what you are studying is an objective reality or is something that exists around human experiences and human life. And so in philosophy, when you read, you understand that 2 main classifications of facts are identified. And sometimes they are identified as opposing contexts. For example, a distinction is made between brute facts and constructed facts. And most of the times, in the natural sciences, it's assumed that they deal with brute facts. Brute facts are those facts that exist, sometimes independent of human culture, human experience. For example, if a natural scientist is studying the moon or the star or rocks, these things exist, whether humans engage with it or they don't engage with it. These things exist. And so sometimes they are referred to as brute facts. All right. So most of the things that are studied within natural sciences, sometimes, mostly, they are assumed to be brute facts. Then we also have social facts or constructed facts. These facts exist only when humans interact. If humans are not interacting, these facts are not assumed to exist. For example, there's in Africa, for example, in some time past, there's something called genital shrinking syndrome, where some people begin to accuse other people that they touch them and their genitals have vanished. Have you heard stories like this before?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, we heard it.
Yes, Doc.
Yeah. So these things are very serious, such that some people even suffer mob justice. That when somebody accuses another person that this person touched me, my genital has vanished, sometimes some people were beaten, sometimes to the point of death. Okay. So genital shrinking is a concept. But is it real or is it not real? Because you go to a different continent, for example, Europe, and they will ask you, what the hell is this? It's not true. It's not real. But you come to Ghana and many other African countries who experience this, and people will tell you it is real. Right? And so it becomes real when a group of, sometimes certain facts become real when certain human beings meet and interact in a particular way. Another example is in this whole, in recent years, there's been a lot of conversation around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Have you heard about it? Has any of you heard of cryptocurrency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Doc.
Which is also a medium of exchange. Now, when you meet some people who interact around cryptocurrency, they can trade. Okay, they can trade using their cryptocurrency, Bitcoins, whatever. But when you meet another set of people who have never heard of these things, they will tell you, this thing is not real, doesn't exist. What kind of money is, they'll ask you, so where is the money? And you say the money is where? On my internet. How can I see it? Okay, so is cryptocurrency a reality or not? All right, so most of the times there's a contention between what should researchers study? Where do you stand? Should we only focus on things that are brutes, that are real, that we can all see to be true? Or sometimes certain realities are only come to life when some people interact. And so there's this distinctions within philosophy about brute facts, constructed facts. And so we'll look at how these transform as you are building your philosophical background. And so there's been a very long bone of contention between natural scientists and social scientists. For a very long time, social science was not considered to be a science. And in Africa, in our African system, there's still that semblance that social science is not science and that only natural science is science. In Ghana, for example, and in many African countries, for example, in our high school system, when students are going to high school, they say, choose your program. They say some people are doing general science, some people are doing general arts. And the understanding is that if you are not doing biology, physics, chemistry that deal with brute facts, then you are not doing science. If you are doing economics, geography, food and nutrition, then you are not doing science. The reason is that for a very long time, natural sciences has only been recognized as the only valid science because they deal with brute facts. And the social sciences do not deal with, because social sciences do not deal with brute facts as if it's not science. And so there's a very blurred line between natural and social dimensions. And even when social sciences started doing research the scientific way, they wanted to do things that resemble what the natural sciences do. All right. And that is what led so many people into thinking that, oh, let's research only things that everybody can relate to. If we pick topics that everybody can relate to, then we can accept it as a brute fact. If you pick topics that some people can relate to, other people cannot relate to, people will not accept it as science. But then, even when you take natural sciences, what we call natural sciences, you would understand that not all facts are very brute. Take, for example, diseases. Okay, cancer, for example. We can understand, is cancer a brute fact or a constructed fact? That's a philosophical question. Is cancer a brute fact? Does cancer exist everywhere? Yes, cancer exists everywhere. But does cancer behave the same way everywhere? No. Okay, so cancer can exist everywhere, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in America, as a brute fact, but also as a constructed fact. The way people relate to cancer is different in different continents or on different continents. For example, the way people will relate to cancer in Ghana or the way people live with cancer is different from the way people live with cancer, what do you call it, in Europe or in the advanced economies. Another example is cesarean section, CS. Okay, cesarean section can be a brute fact. It can also be a constructed fact. It can be it's a brute fact in the sense that it exists. Women deliver through cesarean section, so it exists. It's also a constructed fact in a sense that different people relate to CS different way depending on their context and their religious or cultural beliefs or even their economic development. In the advanced country, if a woman is going to give birth and the doctor said that you need a CX, people are not so much worried. But when you come to Africa and a woman is going to give birth and you say you give birth through CS, the women will start praying. They will start praying and they will start to pray to cancel any form of surgery in their birth process. Have you come across such situations like that?
Yes.
Yes, Doc.
Okay. So the idea is that it's the same process. Why are different people relating to it different ways? If facts are brutes and facts can exist without human values, then those things, people should relate to all facts the same way. But because most of the things in life are social constructions, even if they exist, different people relate to it differently. So sometimes when people, their husbands and families who will run to pastors and their spiritual leaders to pray for them because they've gone to the hospital, they want to deliver, doctors say, we will have to do operation, and they don't want it.
Have to stop all libation before you'll be able to clot. But in other circumstances, they don't also do it, but they can also clot as well. So I don't know, if that one is brutal one or the constructive.
Okay, so when you begin to think that, oh, all rivers are rivers everywhere, then you are developing a brute fact approach to reality. But when you understand that different communities have different way they understand it, they relate to rivers, then you are taking a constructed fact approach or constructed fact ontology to reality. Do you understand it?
Yes, I do understand.
Good.
Yes.
And so for people who think that facts are brutes, when they see a tree, they've seen a tree. When they see a river, they've seen a river. When they see a stone, they've seen a stone. It doesn't mean anything to them. But for those who understand that reality is constructed, people can see the same thing but can make interpretation of it differently. Those people have a constructed fact approach to the ontology. And so it makes them want to understand societies. It makes them want to understand groups of people. It makes them want to understand communities before they can really understand their behaviors. And so you, as an upcoming scientist, what kind of reality do you adopt as an up-and-coming psychologist? Do you think depression is the same everywhere? Or do you think that depression may exist everywhere, but it may be understood differently by different people or different communities? Where you stand will determine the way you approach your research into depression. Do you understand this?
We do.
Okay. And so that is what we mean by ontology. Ontology in terms of philosophy. How do we understand existence? Are existence independent of human interactions, human cultures, or existence are dependent on human beings? If you think existence are independent of human beings, you have a root understanding to ontology. If you think that existence is dependent on human beings, then you are having a constructed approach to a constructed ontology. Now, and so the ontological reality basically, there are basically two main or three main ontological positions. There are those who believe in objective reality. Objective reality means that fact exists independent of human beings. So facts are brute. These ones, we say that's a realist ontology. Okay, realist ontology. Facts are real, independent of human beings. And then there are those who also believe that facts are socially constructed. For these ones, we call it relativism, ontological relativism. For this standpoint, it means that nothing means the same to two people. Everything means different to different people, depending on their background. Okay? And then there's a middle ground, which is often referred to as critical realism. That yes, facts may exist in different places, but it may be interpreted differently. Okay? So, for example, depression may exist. Depression may be a brute fact that exists, but its understanding will be different for different people. So as a psychologist, what is going to be your ontological position? Are you going with realism, realist ontology? Are you going with relativist ontology? Are you going with critical realist ontology? I will leave that question to you, for example, and then for you to decide where you want to pitch your practice and how you want to ask your research questions based on your ontological standpoint. Now, after you have determined where you stand ontologically, the next question comes, epistemology. Epistemology. So if, for example, ontologically, you believe that facts are facts without human interference, facts are brutes, then how do we study facts? Okay, so ontology refers to the study of knowledge, how we produce knowledge, fundamentally how we produce knowledge and what counts as a valid knowledge. Okay, for a very long time in the field of psychology, when you do qualitative research, it was not counted as scientific. In many universities, if you say you want to do qualitative, they'll say, no, it's not valid, it's not science. Because epistemologically, qualitative approach to knowledge construction was argued to be not valid. Because they will say, oh, it's too subjective, too much values in it, so it's not objective. So epistemology is about how do we achieve objectivity? where do our values come in? And Magdalene, the question you asked, we'll address it this session here in terms of epistemology. So science, for example, seeks to achieve an objective knowledge. So the scientists will say that as for this research that I did, my beliefs were not included in this research. My biases were not included. My values were not included in this research. I did this research objectively. Okay, so my values were not included. And because how do we know that you did this research objectively? Oh, I use quantitative approach. So my values do not matter. Is that really the case? We are going to examine whether a scientist can be truly objective, whether there's a certain kind of research where values do not come in at all. All right, because that is what for a very long time, when social sciences wanted to be accepted, like the way natural sciences were believed. Natural scientists were saying that as for us, when we do our research, we don't use the beliefs of the researcher, but use social sciences. Your research is always include, what do you call it? There are too much values in your research. And so there are certain fields that started adopting methods that drive away values from research. Economics started. And so economics started studying economic phenomena by holding all other things constant. So anybody who read economics in some way, somehow, they will say all other things being equal means all other things being held constant. Then they propose their laws. And so they use very rigorous statistics in coming up with economic theories. And since economics started doing that, economics also started gaining respect from natural sciences. And then psychology also followed. Psychology followed by focusing on experimental psychology. And so for a very long time, psychologists use experiments to study human behavior, and in the hope that when we do experiment, when we design experiments and we create our labs, we don't include our values in it, so that the scientific community will believe the science that we do. Okay, and so there has been a very tough epistemological demand on social science. How do you drive values away from research? Okay, and for a very long time, the approach was to hide the values. Don't talk about it. Pretend it's not there. Okay, pretend you are not biased. Pretend that what you are going to study, you don't know anything about it, and pretend you are not related to the subject in any way. And so epistemology answers the question, where do we place values when we are doing research? Okay, how do we achieve objectivity when we are doing research? Should we acknowledge our values, or should we bracket our values, pack all our values and put them aside and approach research? Are we able to achieve objectivity this way? Now, there was so many debates around this. The fact that scientific research should be value-free. No value should come into social science. But over time, critical theories came to understand that it is not true. There can never be science that is value-free.
Yeah.
Oma, please mute. Right. Critical social theories came to understand that value-free social science is not possible. And it's not only in social science, but value-free science is not possible, whether it's in natural science or social science. There can never be any science, whether natural or social, that is free of values. One of the key people who critiqued this was Max Weber. Those of you who did your first degree within social sciences, you must have come across Max Weber before. He was a sociologist and a critical theorist. Are there anybody who has heard of Max Weber?
Yeah, Doug, I've heard of him.
Okay. Right. Maybe in the assigned readings text I will share with you, you'll come across most of his theories. Now, his critique about his epistemological critique is that there's no science that is value-free, whether natural science or social science. Every science has values, okay? And so he distinguished between two kinds of values. He distinguished between value judgment and value relevance. And according to him, he was saying that value judgment is not good for research, right? But value relevance shapes research in very, very significant ways. For example, let's say you are a scientist. You say you are going to do research. You did the experiment, so your values were not included. Why did you choose that research topic in the first place? Let's bring it within the global public health broadly. When COVID came, within 2 years, the global community had found a cure for COVID. HIV has been in existence for decades. Why do you think we still don't have a cure for HIV? Have any of you thought about this before?
Doc,
Yeah.
maybe people are cashing out of it, that's why.
People are cashing out of it, that's why. Okay, anybody else?
Or it's not of interest to
Or
them.
what?
It's not of interest to the
It's not of interest. It's not of interest to who?
to those sciences who bought the vaccine for the
Right. So it's not of interest to them. For them, it's not relevant because it's not affecting them. Do you get it? So if HIV was affecting the West, which have the resources for research, the way COVID started affecting them, would have had a cure for HIV by now. Right? So HIV is kind of very important to Africans because it affects Africans, but Africans do also do not have the resources for developing vaccines for it. Okay, so the fact that when COVID came, the Western world with the resources became so important to them, to their scientists and all of that, was because that in their own values, they determined that this is important, we have to do it. The fact that they are not concentrating on other conditions that are not affecting them, like Ebola, means that in their values, this is not relevant for us. So for you to even choose what to research on shows that your values influence your choice of what to research. And so that is value relevance. Okay, so according to Weber's position, values influence the choice of research topics. Is that okay? What we study reflects what society deems to be important. If you do not see it as important, you will not go into it. All right. So there's no research that is value-free. Okay. Values shapes you to sit down and think that, this topic should be relevant. We need to do this research. We need to do this. Some way, somehow, some values, it led you to decide that this is important. We have to do it. And so for Weber's position, what he was saying is that values can influence the choice of topic. Values can influence what societies research on. However, you can't let values continue to dominate the research after values have led you to decide what to do. So values can influence your choice of research, but after that, the research should be able to proceed objectively using empirical methods. All right. So Max Weber was actually looking out at a value-sensitive social science research and not value-free research. And that is why I was saying that you need to really sit down and do a critical thinking that, why am I interested in this topic? What is influencing my choice of topic? Maybe my supervisor influenced me. Maybe there's somebody in my family who has suffered this, and that is why I'm interested in this. Maybe in my own life experience, I have come across this. I have engaged with this. It has affected me in a certain way, or it has affected an aspect of life I care about in a certain way. Maybe that's why I'm interested in this. Is that okay? You need to be aware of this, because if you keep hiding it, then the same values that led you to choose that topic will keep influencing decisions in the topic, in the research process that you may not be aware of. Okay, so we still don't have vaccine for Ebola. We still don't have vaccine for HIV because in the value relevance of the West, it's not important to them. If it's not important to them, if somebody from the West is researching HIV, should we ignore the fact that you are researching a topic that is not of value to your society? Right? And so if you have, let's say, an institution, a big pharmaceutical, the big pharma sponsoring HIV research in Africa, do you think they will sponsor you to find a cure?
Definitely not.
Definitely not, because it won't be of value to them. They will rather sponsor you to find a vaccine that people can take when they get the HIV. They will not sponsor a research that will prevent people from getting it, because it will be counterintuitive to their values. They need to profit from this.
Now you understand what you're saying.
Right? They need to profit from this. And so values, if we say that let's pretend as if we don't have values, we hurt ourselves as a collectively as a society. Magdalene, do you now understand the question you're asking?
Yes, please.
Good. And so when somebody is doing any research, you as an upcoming scientist, dig deeper. What are the person's values in this research that is being done? It is only when you understand the person's values, that is only when you understand the kind of research questions they asked. That's the only when you understand the methods they used. That's the only time that you will understand how they discuss their findings. You will find their values all the way through. So epistemology is very fundamental. Should we keep our values away from our research, or we should make our values key part of our research? And if we intend to build a strong social science or a strong psychological practice that is accountable to society, then we should make values a key part of our research process. If not, we will not be serving values. We will not be serving the society that we think our training is going to help. Okay. Any questions so far on epistemology? Recently, I think latter part of last year, I was engaged in a conversation with some expatriates and some colleagues of mine about a project that was about to happen. And I was brought on as a mental health expert onto that project to come in. And then we had to assess some fundamental mental health components. And I was telling them that, okay, I see the measures you want, the things you want to use to measure mental health, but they are all deficit-based assessments. We should also add some strength-based assessments. Why, do you ever ask yourself why in Africa, psychological research and mental health research is always looking for problems? Depression, grief, suicide, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. These things are all there. Why are we not doing research that focus on human strength? Why are we not researching happiness? Why are we not researching resilience? Why are we not researching love? Why are we not researching friendship? Why are we not researching strength-based psychological constructs? Okay, and when you dig deeper, you find that because most of the large-scale psychology, mental health research are sponsored from the West, they tell you what they are ready to fund. We have this money to fund this research. If you are interested, apply. And they are not funding strength-based approaches. They are not researching love. They are not researching happiness. They are not researching. And so you as a psychologist, you will be coming in and you choose a research topic and you choose a deficit-based research topic. You choose a research topic that is investigating problem. You will not be investigating strength. And you would think that values are not there. You either being influenced by the psychopolitics of global health, which is why you are choosing the topic you are choosing anyway. In the seminar that I've asked you to to attend tomorrow, which is being given by the professor of psychology. And as I indicated to you, she's my mentor for the past 10 years. She's mentored my career, and she's a very critical psychologist. And so she will discuss more of these things. Okay, if you're a psychologist, you can't just research about things that you are interested in. You don't have the funding for it. You have to go to people who have the funding. They will tell you what they want you to research. Are you becoming aware of the situation we face and what you are coming to deal with as an upcoming scientist? And what could be shaping your research? Whatever topic you think you are interested in now. Have you started having deep critical thought about it?
Yes.
Yes, we are on it.
You're on it, eh?
We are on it. Very, very critical.
Right. Now, let's move to the last component. I talked about 3 components: ontology, epistemology, methodology. Methodology. So your ontology will influence your epistemology, and the 2 of them will influence your choice of methodology. Okay, because there's an ontological, epistemological demand on social science to do away with values. The methodological demand is that what is the best method we can use that can drive away values from our research? Okay, so the quest for objectivity also lead to a quest for methodological validity. Which methodology should we use that will make our research valid? That is also the question of methodological demand. Okay, so I'm sure you have been thinking about your research methods, and the last time we engaged, I think it was Tom who said you wanted to do, what do you call it? You wanted to do randomized control trial, if I remember correctly. Somebody mentioned that.
My mind is changing.
Your mind is changing.
It was Tom. Yes.
I'm not saying change it, but you need to understand the politics of it and the philosophy of it so you're able to situate yourself properly. Okay. Now, this discussion is not to prescribe any methodology or any philosophy or any standpoint for anybody. This discussion is to help you understand the varied nuances so you place yourself. And where you place yourself, you read more on it, and then you're able to defend it where you find yourself. Okay, so there's a methodological journey to find the best method that can help us drive values from our research. And the route to that has been, let's use numbers for our research, because natural sciences use numbers. Social sciences will also use numbers. And so that has led to the dominance of quantitative methods and then quantitative approaches. The randomized control trials, the statistics, the surveys, and then the advanced statistical modeling and all of that. Okay, it is all on a journey to understand that, okay, when we do these methods, it is possible that our values will not come in, and so our methodology will be valid. All right. And so because of that, for a very long time, qualitative methods were not respected within psychology in general and social science in psychology in particular, social science in general. Okay, interviews, focus groups, they were not seen to be valid science. Okay, and so everybody was doing quantitative survey, experiment, because there was that methodological demand to meet objectivity, and numbers were seen as the only way of meeting objectivity. So let's sample more people. And so these days, sometimes when I'm engaging with PhD students, for example, and they say, look, I have 300 samples, should I get more, maybe 600? This PhD I'm doing. I said, the fact that you have more people, right, and you think that will give your research validity, it means that your philosophy is weak. You don't even understand where that philosophy is coming from. Okay, and that is what happens when you are doing a research and your philosophy is very weak. You are doing things you don't understand. Okay, and so you are kind of, hey, when I do this, when I use this, and then you don't even understand why you are doing that in the first place. And that can be very problematic. Somebody will come and say, look, I want to do qualitative. And you ask why? And they are giving you, they say, me, I don't like statistics. That's a very wrong approach to your choice of method. Is that okay? You want to do qualitative, fine. Get a good philosophical grounding that will give you the basis for the qualitative you want to do. If you want to do quantitative, get a good philosophical grounding. If you want to do experiments, randomized control trial. Okay, all right. So,
yes,
so the approach to methodology, the craze for quantitative is because there's a certain demand they have to meet to be able to eliminate subjectivity and to be able to generalize findings. So anybody doing research and say that so I need to get more samples so that I can generalize my findings, it means that the person has a brute fact approach, ontology, a realist ontology. The person thinks the problem they are studying is the same for everywhere. So they should be able to generalize their findings. And these days, everybody talking about generalized findings, general findings, and they don't understand where it's coming from. And so they are not able to even argue for it very well because they have a limited understanding of, they don't have good philosophical appreciation for even that statement to be able to discuss that you are doing research in a community in let's say, Volta region or Eastern region or Northern region. Why do you want to generalize across Africa? Why do we need to generalize across all African countries? And why do we need to generalize globally? Why would somebody do research in a community in the US and the person will generalize the findings globally? Right? The person might have picked some 230 students from maybe a university in the US to do a psychological research, and they will propound a psychological theory, and that theory is being used in Ghana, and the researcher is not questioning it. And the researcher uses the theory as if it is a golden theory. Meanwhile, the study was done within a group of people. Why are you applying it as if the theory is a perfect theory? There's nothing wrong with it. It's because your philosophical understanding of the research enterprise is very weak. And so you are not able to interrogate issues the way issues need to be interrogated, right? So these are the three building blocks of philosophy. What do you call it? Ontology, epistemology, methodology. And so when somebody is doing research and the person says, I'm doing this methodology, we assume that you have sorted your ontological and epistemological issues within that research, which is why you are using the methodology you are using. Okay, it's so disheartening sometimes when you read research and the introduction of the research, the introduction is the ontological stand in the introduction is different. The ontological epistemological stand in the literature review is different. The ontological epistemological stand and the methodology also do not agree with, and you don't know where this person stands. And the person may be a master's student or a PhD student or even a faculty member, even a lecturer of a sort, or a practitioner. But because their philosophical grounding is not very strong. So they publish things and it doesn't add to the knowledge in the field because the philosophy in it is weak. And so you guys should understand these things. Now, all of these three different philosophies have their own ontology, their own epistemology, their own methodology. So when you pick a particular philosophy, you know that, oh, I am inclined to this philosophy. This is our ontological assumption. This is epistemological. This is methodological. These are research questions are asked. These are the methodologies that are used, etc. So we are going to be, in our next session, we are going to be discussing some philosophical traditions and some research paradigm. And then you will understand this philosophy. Where do they stand ontologically? Where do they stand epistemologically? Where do they stand methodologically? How do they frame research questions? What kind of methods do they use? So that as you are thinking through your own research, you are thinking through, what kind of psychologist do I want to be? What kind of clinical psychologist do I want to be? What kind of neuropsychologist do I want to be? What kind of counseling psychologist do I want to be? Which paradigm am I aligning myself? For which reason, when I pick a topic, I make sure it aligns with the kind of psychologist I seek to be. And so that's what we are going to be discussing next. Any questions so far? So on this table, I've tried to summarize the major philosophies you are likely to encounter and one where you are likely to place yourself and in your current thinking and in your future endeavors as a psychologist in terms of your research and your practice. Now we have positivism, interpretivism, constructivism, critical theory, pragmatism, and then postmodernism or post-structuralism. All right. These are the major paradigms. Now, for many of them, when you go into them, they have subgroups or what we call strands. So when you pick positivism, for example, there are two main strands. There are those that we call classical positivism and then post-positivism. All of them have the same ontological assumption and epistemological assumption. Sometimes they differ in terms of methodology. They may differ a little methodologically, right? But ontologically, positivism is holds a realist position. It assumes brute reality, okay, objective reality, independent of human perception or human experience. And so epistemological position on this is about objectivity. Okay, for a positivist researcher, they seek objectivity. So they want to do research that is devoid of any values at all. All right, and they do research in their ability to generalize their findings to the field that everybody else, because this hypothesis is supported, because the statistics is significant, the results can be generalized. All right. And so methodologically, positivists are purely quantitative researchers. Purely quantitative. Now, the only difference is that classical positivism, they favor experiments, like randomized control trial. Okay. But for post-positivism, you can do survey, or maybe some quantitative secondary analysis of data, etc. So when you say you're a positivist, we also need to understand what strand of positivist are you, because you can't discuss classical positivism in your research paradigm and go and do survey. And you can't discuss post-positivism and go and do experiments. Because all of you, when you are writing your research, you write your research paradigm section in your methodology. Where do you stand philosophically? So if you are just writing about classical positivism, if all the ideas you are discussing are aligns with classical positivism and you are doing a survey, it means that you really don't understand what you're doing. All right. And then we have interpretivism. Interpretivism, for these ones, they are the stark reality. They believe in relativism, that there's no reality that is the same for two people or two groups. Okay, so for interpretivism, reality is socially constructed and it varies across contexts. And so they don't care about objectivity. They care about subjectivity. They don't want to do research that they will generalize. They want to do research that they're able to explain their participants very well. They don't care whether the results are generalizable or not. No, they want to get a deeper understanding of this participant they are studying. Recently, there's been an incident in Kumasi where a young woman and her 3 children have been burned to death. Have you come across that situation?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Good.
Yes.
If you are a psychologist, you are researching grief, for example, you are a psychologist, you are researching grief, and then you have collected data and the data includes the husband and the father of this guy, and then anybody who have either lost a father or a brother, or because they have all lost somebody, and you put them in the same survey and you do your analysis. I mean, you are not doing justice to some of your participants. Do you get it? Because some people's pain are so deep. Okay, and so the focus shouldn't. So for these people, they don't focus on generalizing findings. They want to understand this person, this man, this young man, who woke up one day and his wife and 3 children are all dead and gone. How is he going through his grief process? Is that okay? That's a kind of question that somebody who belongs to an interpretivist philosophy would want to do. And so for research methods, they are always using qualitative methods, interviews, ethnography, case studies. So this guy, for example, can be used as a case study. Okay, woke up one day, your entire family has been wiped out. Your entire family has been wiped out. There's another person, I think one man of God, is it Istudanaba also, who lost his daughters in one accident. I think 2 or 3 daughters. Did you hear that incident?
2 with
Yes,
the
3 years
pastor.
ago.
2, okay, 3 years ago.
2, yeah, there were 2 and 1 pastor.
Good. So there are certain things that when you're a psychologist, if your philosophical grounding is not well, you are not well grounded philosophically, you will do the service to your participants through your research. Okay? Because if you are very well grounded philosophically, there are some participants that they shouldn't be mixed with everybody else. Because of the peculiarity of their experiences, they have to be studied into detail to understand their experiences. All right? So when you look at their different strands in interpretivism, there's phenomenology, there's hermeneutics, there's symbolic interactionism. These are all strands of interpretivism. They don't focus on generalizing findings. They want to understand people. Okay? But whether you're a phenomenologist or hermeneutics or symbolic interactionism, even though you are all interpretivism, you will ask separate research questions. And in the slides, I try to give every strand and the possible research question that they ask, so that when you are thinking through your research question, you'll be able to think through the way you should frame your research question. Because you can't be working in interpretivism, you are doing phenomenology, and you are framing research question as if you are doing symbolic interactionism. All right, so you look at that. We'll not go through all the slides, but when you get all the slides, you find all these research questions. And then we have constructivism. The constructivism, they also like the relativism. Okay. So they also believe that there are multiple realities that exist and social interaction shapes it. They also believe in subjectivism, but their focus is much more wider than interpretivism. Interpretivism may focus on individuals. Constructivism may focus on large groups. Okay, so a psychologist could be doing some research within a community-based research, for example, or whilst interpretivism may focus on understanding individuals, constructivism sometimes focuses on understanding group experiences, communal experiences. Is that okay? So the focus of analysis are different for the two of them. Now, you have social constructivism, you have radical constructivism. We'll go into how they frame their research questions. Then we have critical theory. Personally, most of my psychological research I do and my practice is situated within this theory. And so I see myself as a critical psychologist, like that. Critical theory, they believe that reality is shaped over time. Reality is shaped over time. So reality can be shaped by power, politics, culture, and history. power, politics, culture, and history. And so sometimes when you're doing research, you have to decide which one are you interested in this particular point. Are you interested in power dynamics? Is that okay? For example, whether whether the economy is going well or not, people's experience of it will depend on where they stand on the corridors of power. People whose government are in power and they are benefiting from that power, they are likely to tell you, oh, the economy is going well, blah, 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 right? People who have no access to power will tell you different things. Okay, so power is important when you are doing your research. If you are, for example, researching depression as a psychologist and your whole focus is about giving people therapy to be able to manage their depression, what if their depression is as a result of somebody bullying them with power? How is your therapy going to stop that social injustice? All right. So sometimes when you are doing psychological research and you are not asking the right research questions, sometimes you can be blaming participants for the problems they are going through when they are not to be blamed. Somebody has been unemployed for 12 years, has finished school and is not getting jobs to do. The person keeps getting recurring depression, and you keep giving this person therapy, when the basis of that problem is a social injustice. If you're not asking the right questions, you will be blaming. And psychology has for a very long time kept bullying people who were having psychological problems because psychology was very positivistic. Psychology was dominated by positivism. So if you your problems are your internal resources. You are not strong. You are not, and they keep sovereign different therapies, and they were not doing anything to correct certain social injustices. Okay, if we're critical psychologists, sometimes you realize that you have to lobby policies, certain policies to be implemented, so that certain clients you work with, their lives could be improved. Your therapy may not always improve if the root of their problem is power, or when the root of their problem is politics, or when the root of their problem is culture, or when the root of their problem is history. For example, you are working with a client, let's say a 39-year-old lady who is going through depression, and you keep giving the CBT. This is a 39-year-old lady who is not married, who doesn't have a child. In a Ghanaian culture that determines marital age and childbearing age for women. Okay, so the person's depression could be driven by a cultural issue, and you are giving therapy in your office. And then this client will go back to the same society that keeps using the culture to victimize the person. And you are doing your research on depression among women, and you are not paying attention to a cultural element. Your research may not be helping your clients. Okay, and so for epistemological, they believe in knowledge is a shared power, a shared relation. Sometimes you are the psychologist, yes. You are studying depression, yes. But you are not the one experiencing depression. Let the people experiencing the depression explain to you what they are going through. Because you may understand depression as defined in the books. You may not understand depression as experienced in their lives. Do you understand this statement? Does this statement make sense?
Yes, please.
Good. Because if you think that the textbook definition of depression, if you apply the same to everybody else, that means that you are adopting a positivistic stand. Okay? Depression is there. You're a psychologist, you've been trained, this is how you understand depression. But the person also going through probably also understand it in a certain way. Sometimes listen to them. Let them tell you what the depression means to their lives. That way you'll be able to work with them better than when you start developing some psychological interventions when you don't understand the way they're experiencing depression in their own lives based on certain maybe social position they occupy in the society. And so for critical theorists, they do a lot of research on participatory action research. They work with people when they are doing their research. Okay, they don't just sit down and develop a questionnaire and take to the field. They engage for a very long time. And then we have pragmatism. Somebody who says, oh, I want to do mixed method, and they don't understand why they want to do mixed method. There's a pragmatist philosophy. For pragmatism, they understand that reality is plural, like that. But for them, their epistemology is on instrumentalism. What is your research question? What methodology is the best to get answers? And so sometimes they do mixed method. Mostly pragmatists do mixed method. But it doesn't mean that anybody doing mixed method is a pragmatist. I did mixed method for my MPhil research, for my PhD research, but in both ways I use critical theory. Okay? It depends on how you are conceptualizing the problem you are studying. But it's very difficult to say you are a pragmatist, but you are doing quantitative. That one, it will be too difficult to defend. It will be too difficult to defend. So pragmatism mostly aligns with mixed method. But what I'm telling you is that somebody can do a mixed method with the other philosophies other than pragmatism. And then we have post-colonialism, postmodernism. Postmodernism, they believe in, they also do not believe in single reality, right? They don't believe in universal knowledge systems. They believe in, they believe the fact that conversations produce knowledge, discourse shapes knowledge, okay? And so somebody working with postmodernism, for example, may do discourse analysis, deconstruction, or genealogical methods. And when I was doing my PhD, I helped a certain lady who was doing a postmodern research on identity construction. He was looking at how US presidents construct their identities through their political campaigns. Okay, and it was a very interesting research. And since then, I have always been wanting somebody who may be interested in identity construction, politics, so we can do some research on identity construction of our politicians. For example, during campaigns, the things Baumia was saying on campaign platforms, how is that shaping his identity and the way, for example, voters are perceiving his identity. When Akufo-Addo was coming into contesting the presidency, he lost the first two elections. One of the key ways people viewed him is that he was arrogant. Do you remember, or did you come across that narrative that he was arrogant?
Yes.
It had to take social psychologists to help him reconstruct his identity. When he was coming back again, the election that helped him to win 2016, he came with a different person. That's where the slogan, the battle is the Lord's and everything, because they were working on the psyche of the Ghanaians. So they created a new identity. They constructed a new identity in the minds of the people towards Akufo. Mahama consistently has been viewed to be humble. Do you come across this narrative? Right. So all of these things, somebody can just pick maybe speeches that Mahama has conducted, transcribe those ones, and use it to do research, right? Using either a discourse analysis or a deconstructivist method. But such a person should come from a postmodernist paradigm in discussing these, in discussing such approaches. So fundamentally, these are the major paradigms, okay, that you have to probably sit down and decide where you belong. Where do you want to belong? You may not have to decide as if, oh, once I've chosen this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But when you're doing your research, we want to know where are you coming from? How are you coming into this research? What kind of psychology are you doing with your research? Okay, and so you should be thinking through the method that the research topic that you are interested in, and the goal that you want to accomplish. Which philosophy will best serve you. Okay, personally, as a social psychologist, I do critical theory. I believe that major psychological problems we face as a people, the problems are within our context. How can we improve our communities? How can we improve our schools? How can we improve our workplaces? How can we improve our society to improve mental health and all of that? So most of the research questions I do is mostly situated within critical theory. Even though you can be a critical theory, but you do quantitative approach. It all depends on what kind of research questions you are asking. Is that okay? That is fundamentally where the issue is. So any questions so far on these paradigms? Any questions so far?
Yeah, Doctor.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I was just considering the critical theory and the methodological implications.
Okay.
When you look at it, we have the participatory action research, and then critical ethnography. So with that, as maybe you want to research on dementia, I don't think I can apply this critical theory instead of maybe pragmatism also, because of the mixed method approach and then the practical inquiries also.
If you start if you start your conversation from the methodology, you will be confused. Okay. Start the conversation from the ontology.
Okay.
You want to do dementia. For example, what is it about dementia that you are interested in? Right? What goal do you hope to achieve from the dementia that you are interested in? Because somebody will be doing dementia, the person will be looking at caregivers of people with dementia. But the person is doing research on dementia. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So it depends on what is it about dementia that you are interested in and what do you hope to achieve with it? Okay, if you hope to maybe highlight societal awareness of it, right? Then of course you may want to go through the critical theory. But if you say, oh, I'm just choosing pragmatism, maybe I have this research question, I'm choosing pragmatism because I just want to use the best method that can give me my data. I don't really have a strong philosophical stand. I just want the best method that can give me my data. You can also do that using pragmatism, okay? But if you want to be a bit political with your research, then you may want to do critical theory. But if you want to be, if you want to just do something that can be generalized, you may want to look at positivism. If you want to do research that can let people understand what people with dementia go through, you may want to look at interpretivism. So it's always about what do you hope to achieve with this research? Do you get it? And which philosophy will be the best friend for you before you even think about methods? Is that okay?
Yes, please. Yes, I got it.
Any other question? The reason why I let us have this foundational discussion is that going forward, the discussions will be more targeted in terms of, it will be targeted around the research topics as individuals you are interested in, right? I will get those research topics, and then as we move on through the semester, I will be helping you think through, do some reflective thinking on some of the important issues you need to resolve, so that by the time you move on to developing your proposal, you have a number of things sorted out already. Is that okay? Right. So when you get the slides, you would for the subsequent slides, when I pick positivism, it kind of develops it ontologically, epistemologically, but fundamentally, what the information that have been provided on the table are being provided details. So It will give the ontological, epistemological, and methodological implications, and then also provide sample research questions. Sample research questions, so that it will help you to also start thinking how you are going to frame your own research question. So if you want to do classical positivist research, these are sample ways you can frame your research question. If you want to do post-positivism, these are some of the ways you can frame your research questions. And then we'll move on to interpretivism. You will look at the ontology, epistemology, methodological implications. And then you'll move on to, if you want to do phenomenology-based interpretivism, these are the ways you can frame your research question. If you want to do hermeneutics, okay, hermeneutics will basically be concerned about, let me give you an example. Somebody, this gentleman's case who has lost his wife and children, two psychologists can study the same person. Somebody can study him using phenomenology to talk about his experience. How is your everyday life like? How are you going through this pain? How are you processing the pain? Yes, I will share the recordings. Somebody is asking. You'll get the recordings, okay? So somebody can look at how is your everyday life, how do you go through the day and all of that using phenomenology. Another person can use hermeneutics to focus on how is the guy talking about his pain. Okay, so the same, somebody can go and interview this person, come and transcribe. If you are using phenomenology, your analysis will focus on his everyday experiences. But if you are using hermeneutics, your analysis will be, how is he talking about the pain? What words, what phrases is he using? And how does that give us insight into the way he's processing the pain? Is that okay? And so it's very important you understand what kind of philosophy you are doing. And that is the reason why two people can research the same topic using different philosophies. Okay? And then when you move on to constructivism, the slides will discuss the various approaches, the ontology, epistemology, methodology, and then whether you want to do social constructivism, some questions, the way you have to pose your question, okay? Somebody can also study this same guy using social constructionism, focusing on how is this guy's interaction with people influencing his grief process, right? His interaction with his family, his interaction with his friends, his interaction with his co-workers. How is that influencing his recovery or his grief process, all right? And so that will be a social constructionist, a constructivist kind of way. Or whether you want to do radical constructivism, that can also be done. And then critical theory, whether you want to do the Marxism critical theory, which looks at power structures, whether you want to do feminism, where you want to investigate gendered approach to your research. So somebody can be interested in depression using feminism and just want to understand how do men and women experience depression in Ghana, or how do men and women experience depression in a particular community. And that will be a feminist critical theory to that research. Or whether you want to do critical race theory, and then pragmatism, the different ways you can ask your research questions to be able to get you the mixed method approach you want. And then also postmodernism. And so all of these sample research questions have been provided that can help you. And then part of the ending of the, what do you call it? The slides will discuss what this should mean for you as an upcoming psychologist. Are you going the positivist way? Are you going in interpretivist, constructivist way? Because sometimes you can merge two theories together to shape your practice, essentially. So you'll read on the research implications for these philosophies, and also implications for your practice as a psychologist as well. Okay, but these themes will come up in our everyday discussions whenever we have a class. these issues will come up and we'll discuss it, and then it will start throwing more light, and then you start gaining more understanding into this, right? So any question before we bring the class to an end? Any question? Okay, so I will share the slides with Tom today together with the research, what do you call it? With a course outline so that he can make it available to you. In our next discussion, I will first of all have an engagement with each of you. I'm hoping that our next one will be in person, probably next week. And the initial discussions will focus on how have you been thinking through your research? Which philosophy are you looking at? How is it shaping the way you are thinking through issues and all of that? And then I will start helping you to shape your research ideas. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right. So if there is no further question, we will end here. I hope I have been able to open your eye to some critical thinking around research. That research is not just about getting a topic and deciding what kind of data or how many samples, but it's a deeper level thinking, because the philosophies will influence the way you read other people's work actually when you start your literature review.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we will end this discussion here, and then we'll catch up later. Enjoy the best of the rest of the day. I wish you all the best.